This is the second video for Chapter 34 of Ecce Romani, and it is going to look further at positive, comparative, and superlative adjectives, specifically the information that's on pages 66 and 67. Here's an adjective, happy, lightus, and we show it in the positive degree, so lightus happy, the comparative degree, lightior, lightius, which means happier, and then the superlative, lightissimus happiest. Hopefully this should be pretty self-explanatory in terms of how we've got this. If you're still confused as to where this comes from, you might want to go back and rewatch the first video. We're going to look a little more in depth at these different degrees and how they function. So the positive and the superlative, if you look at these, they both end in us, don't they? So we know that there's two different types of adjectives. There's 2, 1, 2, us, and then there's also third declension. For these us, adjectives, we're going to use this chart here. And any one of these endings, masculine, feminine, neuter, singular, or plural, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative, can be replaced instead of the us, so that our adjective agrees with the noun that it's modifying in gender, number, case. We could do that for lightus, so the happy boy, the happy girl, happy men, happy women, and so on. We could also do that for lightissimus, the happiest boy, the happiest girl, etc., etc. Positive adjectives, again, like we just said, either come in a 2, 1, 2 variety or third declension variety. Third declension we'll get to in just a second. For a superlative form of an adjective, it is always going to be an us, adjective ending. So we would always see, regardless of whatever the base of the adjective is, if it's superlative, it's going to end in issimus, and we're going to use these endings that are on the bottom of the screen to decline it, to make it match in the gender and the number and a case with a noun that it's modifying. So we can take that to the bank. That is always, always, always going to happen. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. What we want to look at a little more closely is this comparative adjective form. So lightior, lightius, happier. As we look at that, this is actually going to be a third declension adjective, and comparative adjectives are always third declension, so they take third declension adjectival endings. So for lightior, which is both masculine and feminine, and then lightius, which is neuter, we're going to use these forms below on the end of that. So let's look specifically at how that works. We get lightior, that's masculine, lightior feminine, and then again lightius neuter. After that, we're going to add the third declension adjective endings, namely is, ace, ibus, ace, ibus, onto that stem, which is now lightior. So as you're going across this chart, starting with the masculine nominative singular, that gives us lightior, lightior, lightius, lightioris, lightioris, lightioris in the genitive, lightiori, lightiori, lightiori dative, lightiorem, lightiorem, and then lightius in the accusative. Remember, in neuter, nominative and accusative are the same. Ablatives, lightiora, lightiora, lightiora. Nominative plurals, lightiores, lightiores, lightiora. It's an A at the end of the neuter nominative plural because that's how neuters function. And we can go on through the rest of the chart and you can see this. The giveaway here, the indicator that you have a comparative form of an adjective is that IOR or IUS. If you see that after an adjective stem, you know that you have the comparative form, so happier, more happy. That's different, again, from the superlative, which we mentioned a few minutes ago. That's the issimus So that will be the way that you tell what form of an adjective, what degree of an adjective you're dealing with. If there's IOR or IUS, it's the comparative adjective. If it's issimus or one of those us, endings, then it's the superlative form. So be sure you take a good look at this chart, as well as the us, chart we had up earlier for the positive and superlative forms, and hopefully that will make your understanding of these different degrees of adjectives rock solid. One last thing we want to talk about is that some adjectives are irregular in how they form their comparatives and superlatives. We talked about this in class, and it does this in English too. For example, the adjective good is a positive adjective, but to make that comparative, we don't say gooder, obviously, we say better. And we don't say goodest, we say best. So good, better, best. There's obviously a drastic change in the forms. Well, the same happens in Latin. Good in Latin is bonus 2, 1, 2 adjective. But to say better, that is melior, melius, which is declined the same way we just saw for any comparative adjective. Then to say best, it's optimus another 2, 1, 2 adjective. Malus, which means bad. Again, we don't say badder, instead it's worse. And the Latin form for that is peior, peius. To say worst, it's pessimus, Magnus means big. Bigger is major, maius, and then the biggest is maximus. Parvus means small. To say smaller, that's minor and minus, and then the smallest is minimus, Multus means much. The comparative, there's just one form. It's plus. So it's not technically an adjective. It's just plus. It's sort of adverbial or substantive. We're going to see it in forms oftentimes with a partitive genitive. So plus vini, more wine. Literally more of the wine, but we say more wine. And then for the most, that's a 212 adjective pluribus. Lastly, we can take much and make it plural. So multi, multa is many. More is, in English, still the comparative form, but the Latin plural form is plures or plura. And then the most, when it's describing something that's plural, is plurimi, plurimi, plurima. So these irregular comparative and superlative adjectives are unique, obviously, and you want to memorize these. You will be tested and quizzed on them. Looking through this chart, you can see in both the comparative and the superlative forms, not to mention the positive ones that we've known for a long time, there are many, many, many English derivatives coming from these various forms, obviously. And you should be able to just look through the chart at a glance and see where some of those come from. So that's it for this video. I would really strongly recommend you look at exercises 34C and 34D to practice making some forms of comparative and superlatives. 34E is going to give you a chart that you can fill out the various forms. And then 34F is going to give you positive, comparative, and superlative forms of adjectives in sentences to see how that's going to work in translation. Thanks. We'll see you next chapter.